Alright, in this video we're going to be replacing Malenia's model and discussing another texture issue and how I found a way to solve it after several hours of trial and error. So first thing, I'm obviously going to make a project folder. I named it Malenia Build, and I'm going to find Malenia's CHR files. Now there are two different sections of files. I'm not sure what the second one is, but today I'm going to be using, um, what is it, like 2110, 2180, uh, 2120. We're going to be using 2120. So, as usual, I just need the CHR, the high texture, and the low texture. I technically don't even need the low texture, but it's fine. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in there anyway. And then I'm going to just put them into a folder for Malenia. Um, so I copied all of that, and now I'm going to make another folder, and I'm going to name it like stock or something so I can remember that this is where all the Malenia files are that I'm going to be messing with. And obviously now I can't do anything with these without unpacking them. So I will need to have Yabber and drag and drop onto Yabber. Um, and then obviously you're going to have to open up the texture files and then drop the TPFs on Yabber as well in order to be able to look at textures. And then the Filver file needs to be dropped on the Bloodborne in order to be able to grab the SMD and put them into Blender. TPF. Oh, I gotta go back to Yabber, drop it, and then I hate this view. I'm gonna put it on the list. And then now the texture file is open for me to mess with. Alright, next step. As you see me do in the previous videos, I combined all the texture maps into one so that I can create a single material to use and then combine all the UV maps. So currently I'm just trying to I'm trying to move the body UV map into its proper corner, um, making sure everything's lined up correctly. The other, the other UV maps would be the face, and then the bottom one on the right is the hair. Um, the UV map doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but basically what I'll be doing with it is just using the grayish area. I actually won't be using any of the black. It just doesn't work out. I don't know what all this extra color is, but I'm going to skip ahead here. So remember, this uh, import came with several um, objects, I guess, per se, separated meshes. And so I joined them together into their three main parts, which you can see in the UV map. We have the body texture, so I combined everything that was body related into one. That would be anything related to the body, and then everything related to the face. I joined them all together, so it'd be like their eyeballs and their cheeks and stuff like that. And then their hair was literally just their hair. The hair band was actually a part of the body, so I had to separate them again and then make sure I properly joined them. What I'm currently doing is clicking the three main texture entities, the body, the head, and the hair, and I'm making sure that in the um, texture editor right here, that they are all using the same map, uh, where they're all the same um, texture map, which you can see in the image of, like, it's right above it. It's the three textures in one. But I'm currently just making sure that every single one of them is linked to the same map so that I can easily import this. Alright, so there's something wrong here. The eye thing is supposed to be black. So the other thing is I want to narrow down on the materials used. I only want one material because when we import this into the game, it's going to read every individual material and we don't want that. So I'm going to delete as much as I can. So what's happening here is it appears that the bandana is using a solid color, and I don't want that just for simplicity's sake. So what I'm going to do is actually, because it still has a UV, so I'm going to add an image texture, all right? And then same thing we would do to the body or the hair, and I'm going to um, go into edit mode, and I only want to highlight the bandana part. So I'm going to highlight a little bit and then Control L and it will highlight everything linked. And then I will push G um, to try to figure out where in the world this is. Usually it'll be linked over by the origin, but here it's actually just like right there. It's super tiny, it's only a pixel, but that's all I need. I only need it to be right there, and that is perfect. So now I have um, pretty much the head all as one material, so I can delete everything that isn't necessary. So click it and then push minus, and oops, that's what it looks like when you don't have any material. So I'm going to add a new material, and I'm just going to uh, I'm just going to manually add it. Just start completely fresh, and it should just automatically work. Yep. The difference between the pitch black and this one is um, the material that I deleted had some adjustments to it, like the roughness and the metallic um, stuff you would see in that grain box in the texture editor. And I don't want to mess with it. I want to use the actual um, paint itself, the paint image. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing to the head. I'm going to add the exact same map so that every single, um, all three of these are using the exact same map. Now, if I join them, we're going to notice that it's causing an issue where uh, some of it disappears. The color disappears. So it doesn't matter how I do it. Um, Joining one of them with another makes one of the materials disappear. So what's going on here is there's a difference in the UV map names. So in order to fix that, we actually have to change the UV maps. I will show you how to do the UV map in a minute, but currently I want to show you another problem you'll encounter, which is when you import a model and it's just completely different size, or it keeps changing sizes, and I can't tell you exactly what's causing the issue. I tried a few things like applying transform and stuff like that, but the fastest way to just fix the problem is open up another Blender project and import your um, your model, not the model you've been working on, but the model that you want to um, change, I guess. So in this case, it's going to be Malenia. And she's gonna look super weird. The bones are just huge. So that flowering thing is her blossom, and then she's got the wings and stuff, but her bones are just ridiculously large. It's not a problem, it's just kind of weird. Anyway, so uh, we're going to go ahead and just copy everything, and then paste it into the project that we're working on, and it'll just stay its own thing. It won't like mess up or anything. Another option is you can take your project and copy it and then paste it into here. Um, but regardless, you want to make sure that it's lined up perfectly with Elden Ring's model. So in this case, I have to rotate her and then make her large enough to be able to readily fill the body that I want to replace. It's a little hard to see with all of this stuff going on, so I'm going to go ahead and start deleting anything that I don't need. I'm going to pretty much make Malenia naked. Oops, we forgot to include the armature, the bone system, the skeleton. I gotta make sure I click that. I'll just click all of it, and then let's retry rotating everything. It's important that I have a skeleton system, and if you don't have one, then I would suggest looking up a Blender tutorial on how to add in a skeleton. It's going to be temporary, but it just helps tremendously when you're trying to change like where her arms are and where her legs are in order to match up with the Elden Ring model. Um, so I want to get everything as close as I can so that I can do as little movements with the bones as possible. So her feet look pretty, everything looks pretty centered. Um, I'll make her a little bit larger so her head fills in spot. So I'm definitely going to have to increase her arms here. Anyway, so I deleted all that extra stuff just like I said I was going to do. I just wanted her model. So that's her helmet. So the thing with Malenia is she has two phases and her body is actually using both phases at the same time. And I would assume what's happening is that at phase two it's coded to delete anything with certain names. And I don't have enough experience to be able to um, decode all that, and I quite frankly don't want to spend the time to figure it out. So I'm just going to replace um, all of it because it just makes more sense. So we're going to go ahead and mess with the armature here. Um, Sorry, I'm really tired. What I'm trying to do right now is make it so I can see the bones. So all I did was add it to the forefront, just so I could quickly just click and all the bones that I need. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and rotate the bones into a pretty close position, starting with um, the primary bones of the selection, which will be her upper arm. And then I'm going to select the second most primary, which will be her forearm, and then I guess third primary, which will be her hands. And I won't technically mess with her fingers all too much. It's barely noticeable, but I will go ahead and extend her arm to the length of Malenia's arms, pretty much as close as possible without distorting it too much. I'd say that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and do it to both sides and just clean up the bones a good bit. Um, and then I'll go ahead and skip ahead here. So I cleaned up her bones. I'm going to go ahead and delete everything that's Malenia except her skeleton system. Um, so I'll click join, and now what I'm going to do is link their data and transfer it. So I still have the two um, parts, and uh, it'll still work out like that. Um, but since her head doesn't move, I'm actually going to start with her body and link her body to all layers and click off, and it should transfer just fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and do it to her head as well. Um, I don't know why I'm doing that. I don't need to do that yet, but make sure you link her head. Um, but now we got to fix her skeleton system. So uh, the problem here the reason that her arm's doing this is because we need to change her rest pose. So we're going to go ahead and figure out how to do that. So let's get her skeleton into a proper rest mode so that we can properly link it. So we're going to click uh, the body, and we're going to add another armature. So add modifier, and we're going to give it the same skeleton. It's going to deform the body a good bit. Now let's go ahead and apply this modifier, I mean, and click on the body, go to pose mode, make sure everything's selected, and then go to apply pose as rest. And then boom, everything is good. And if we go into the pose mode viewer, we can see that the pose and the rest are exactly the same. Um, the head doesn't actually change at all, so it didn't matter whatever I did, but we click both and they're the exact same. So now they are pretty much identical to Malenia's bones, and I can link them without having pretty much any issues at all. So what I'm going to do is click them, and then um, I will link them, transfer the data. So what I did was I clicked um, her body first, and then I clicked Malenia's, and then I'm clicking all of this. Make sure to add all layers, and then it should transfer pretty nicely. And that's going to transfer things like the vertex groups and maybe some paint. Now let's change her armature to Malenia's, and now we can actually delete. We gotta make sure all of it's transferred to Malenia's, but now we should be able to delete these, basically the temporary skeleton we had, which is kind of ugly. Let's delete this. Um, we could test first. You highlight some of the bones and rotate it, and it shouldn't move anything. Nope. So we can delete that, and that was, as I said, that was her old skeleton. Now she's hooked up to Malenia's skeleton, which will allow her to move properly in the game. So if I were to select um, and go to pose mode and select some of these bones and move them, it's gonna it's gonna be wonky because it's not the right bones. It's not proper movement, but it'll work. So now that we've proven that her skin deforms to the bones, what we now need to do is hide these horrible fucking bones. And we can pretty much delete all of Malenia. We don't need her anymore. As long as we have her bones, we don't need her anymore. And then we got this. But what is next? So we're far from done with this model. We still have a few things we need to fix, like the UV map, like the names. But let's go ahead and do some groundwork before we continue any farther. So I'm going to save this as an FBX. I gotta sneeze. We're going to save as just in case the computer crashes or something like that. So we'll go ahead and make a save as so that we can quickly access Blender. And then we will export it as an FBX. Um, and you already know how to do that, so I'll skip ahead. So I'm going to take a silver template that has nothing in it and go ahead and rename it. So my favorite method uh, of importing models is to attach. Um, and it works great when you have uh, one giant um, like texture map. So this just works out really well. Um, So I'm going to go ahead and attach just temporarily. Like I said, we're not done with her model in Blender yet, so all I did was minimize her. But so we got her in here, just making sure that she works. But you see how there's the dummy and then there's two textures? So we don't actually want that. We want to minimize this as much as possible. And that's what the UV map renaming is going to do. Because remember, when we joined it, it was fucking up the textures. Like it was making them go blank. And we don't want that. And so the reason for that is because um, Blender sent out data telling Filver that there is more materials that are needed. So we're going to fix that. But we need to make sure that the texture folders have our new albedo in it. Um, so we're going to go ahead and grab these. You should have already made these. I have plenty of videos on it already. And we're going to make sure that they are inside the texture folders. Early on, we already unpacked this, so that's nice. So I need the DDS, which sucks because Blender doesn't read DDS and the game doesn't read PNG, so it's just conflict of interest there. Now we need to make sure that we have it in the L as well, even though it's not really all that important half the time, but I like to make sure it's just in there just in case. Now we're going to go to TPF, and this is absolutely important, otherwise the game doesn't know that they even exist. So I'm going to actually just steal an A and an N, um, which would be these two. I'm going to copy them and paste them down at the bottom, just so I can quickly figure out where they are. Oh, there's some at the bottom already. There's an A and an N. So I'm going to copy these, and I'm going to paste them at the very end. Remember, we need the L at the very end of the L folders because it just clarifies that we're in an L folder, not the H folder. So the name here is pretty simple. It's just 2B. So that was easy to memorize. We're going to save that. And we're going to have to rename our two pictures here with an L at the end. It's very hard for me to see, but it'll be at the very end, underscore L. All right, now we got to do a pack for the TPF, and we will pretty much never touch this file ever again. Then we will pack that, the entire L folder, and now let's go ahead and do all that same stuff to the H folder. Um, we just scroll down, since we already know there's an A and an N at the very bottom, we'll grab that information, paste it, and then rename it. Ow, my chest is hurting a lot right now. Oh god, that hurts. Oh. And then just repack everything. I'll go ahead and skip ahead. In Filver's viewport, if you click it and then push F1, it'll let you see the mesh lines, which in this case is super useful for seeing um, where something is, because she has just so much going on. And what we were originally going to do was leave the wings, the sword, and the blossom at the bottom. But I think there was a little issue with the wings conflicting with the textures of the body. So I actually ended up having to delete the wings at the end. But we'll get there when we get there. For now, I was just wanting to show you that if you push F1 while in the viewport, you can change it to the mesh lines themselves, which will make it a lot easier to find things. Here's a little sneak peek of what we were going for, which is pretty badass, not gonna lie. Um, but it's not what ended up happening. We ended up having to remove the wings, like I said. This is the actual texture glitch that was happening, which I would The only thing I could think of was because of the wings. It's the only thing that I changed that actually fixed it. But otherwise, it was just doing this. I don't know how to describe it. It's just a weird texture glitch. Some of the textures were okay, some of them weren't. It's weird that the cutscene kept her like that. Um, but she kept her blossom, she kept her wings. She's pretty badass looking, not gonna lie. The only problem, of course, is um, the weird texture stuff. But we're gonna fix that problem, of course. So let's go ahead and fix the UV problem here, where we can't join both of them. So we're gonna go to the data information here and then click UV maps. So at the right of this whole bar thing, you'll see the camera icon. The one that is lit, this one, is the one that actually has the textures, is the current UV map. And as we delete them, it highlights the next one, but none of them are the one that we actually need. So what we're going to do is, remember, we need to do this for both objects because we need to combine them. We're going to delete everything that's below that top one or whatever one is highlighted for you. We're going to delete everything except that one, and we can actually rename it UV, and then we should be allowed to join it. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete everything except, oh, let me undo that. Rename this UV, bam. And now both of them are only have that one. That's all they have. So safely we should be able to just join them together. And do that, bam. And now they both kept their textures. Isn't that awesome? So I can't confirm or deny that this problem would be an issue for you, but if we click this little thing right here, it'll give us an option between data and object. And most of the projects that work don't actually have object material listed. They only have the data material listed. Uh, so if we look at the top, we can see that there's two little red circles, which means that there's two material things listed, even though Um, most of my projects only have the data one linked, but if we remove both of them, obviously we won't have any data at all. So we only need to add um, that one, the data one. I have opened Malenia's Filter file, but let's go ahead and open up a template file, um, which obviously, like I said, has nothing on it. And let's import our model of um, what is her name, B2 into it. So I'm you can leave the LOD on or off. It's up to you. Um, LOD is just long distance rendering, and for most mobs you'll want to push yes. For bosses it doesn't matter too much. You can push no. So now we only have one material thing, and I'm just I don't know. I'm just gonna delete the underscore E. I'm not sure that it actually makes that much of a difference, but every model seems to be different. So if it helps you, then go ahead and do it. Another thing that I've noticed is sometimes the uh, the model only reads the dummy file or the dummy textures that we just edited. Sometimes it'll read this file. In this particular instance, it's completely skipping the dummy and only reading the actual material it's supposed to. So just to be safe, I changed both of them and it works out for me. I click modify, make sure everything's saved, and we should be ready to attach now. So I'm gonna go back to Malenia over here. Oops, I accidentally exited out. Um, so I did that nifty little trick where I made it to where I can see all of her mesh lines by pushing F1. Um, so now we got to go into mesh and figure out what all we're going to delete. And you should already know that if you click check, it'll highlight exactly what, pretty much what's there. Um, so I know majority of them are going to be deleted, so I just went ahead and did select all, and I will uncheck anything like the sword. I specifically do need the sword. Um, I think I can leave the plants in, it should be pretty fine, but I'm gonna go ahead and skip ahead. Alright, everything's checked or unchecked, and I am ready to click modify, which will delete things. Boom. So her sword and her flower are still there, which is fine. So now we can click attach, and we can go ahead and find that that filter we were just working on and attach it, and then we can click modify and it'll appear. Sometimes it's a little slow depending on how many vertices there are. There we go. And she's pretty much ready to go because we did all the hard work in in her file. So we click modify on everything just to make sure everything's safe, and push F2 and I can get solid whites. I'll click modify before I exit out. I don't even actually have to exit out, but regardless, in the end I will need to go ahead and pack the CHR file and then drop them into the mod folder so that I can test it out. And bam, so her clothes are still white, but overall that's pretty much what I was going for, and so it kind of works out in the end.